Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Richard Maxwell coming to you live from the Arcadia High School Creative Musical Arts and Sciences. This is our main soundstage room. I am joined this afternoon by a whole bunch of folks. We've got some students, we've got some student teachers, and I was just saying before we went live here that truly we do these just about every week. We do a live show on Thursdays and we do these on Fridays. And honestly, it just makes the weeks so awesome. I really enjoy these conversations. I love watching the performances and everything else. You can find an archive of all of these shows. We've been doing these since March, since the pandemic started. It is so ironic to me that the pandemic hit and we've done more live performances or live events since the pandemic than we were doing prior. It's a really bizarre irony to me. But you can find all that at arcadiacmas.com. YouTube, everything is out on arcadiacmas.com/YouTube. And we very much appreciate all the viewership and the support of the students and all that. Today, I thought it might be kind of fun just to talk briefly about something that seems to travel around at least social media, it seems quite a bit. But every time there's like a major sporting event or a major happening, so we just had the Super Bowl, the big sports ball event there at last weekend. You can tell how much I keep up with such things, but that's whatever. But every time there's an event like that, there's inevitably a national anthem, and there's always some kind of commentary, some kind of I don't know, thing. And people are evaluating and people are saying what they liked or what they didn't like, what was appropriate, wasn't appropriate. I thought it would be kind of fun to get your perspective on why does that seem to always happen? And B, gonna have Mr. Montgomery join us, very cool. Is that even fair? Like first of all, let's start with this. What is the fascination with the national anthem? Beyond the patriotic part of it, I mean, we could talk about that, but I just mean musically. Like, what's the deal with people? I feel like I'm about to jump into like a bad Jerry Seinfeld imitation, so I'm going to try not to do that. But like, what's up with that? You know, I mean, like, why? sorry, Jerry. Why do events with the national anthem seem to bring with them this unbelievable likelihood that people are just gonna bash on no matter what? There's just like, it's like invitation for criticism. What is the Jay, please.
I feel like because in America, it's such a well-known song that people are adjusted to their own view of it. So when they hear something different, it's easy to bash that.
That's fair. Other thoughts? What do we think? Is it just because it's so well known?
Yeah, because like if you're to change it, it becomes like almost uncanny. You know what I mean? Because it'll. Sorry, that echo is like making me struggle talking.
Hello. Hey, we're being joined by some special guests. We put our masks. Absolutely, we are in the middle. We're gonna pause our podcast. This is fun. No, please come in. Please. Oh, please. Yeah. Come on in. Come on in. Hi. Yes, please. You'll get our quick. This is what we do. Okay. That's a really cool reason to have an interruption. We had a prospective student touring. I may edit that out because that's probably some weird dead time, but that's okay. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. The national anthem is, we were saying, it's just so well known. I'm just curious, how many of you ever, just amongst the 7 of us, have performed the national anthem at some point in your life? Okay. You've never, wait, really? Aiden, you've never done the national anthem. It's okay. Jaden, you haven't? You've never done it.
No, I've never done it because I'm like kind of intimidated by it. You know?
Okay, so hold on to that thought a second. Here's my question: has anybody you sung it? I've played it on different instruments. I've never sang it. Jay, you've sang it? Elias, you've sang it? On the scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most difficult, 0 being the most easiest, how would you, and this is actually for anybody, how would you describe the national anthem in terms of like its level of difficulty to perform? How about just instrumentally or vocally on a scale of on the scale of 0 to 10, where would you place it? Just call out numbers. I'm just curious.
I feel like if it's a solo, it's at least like 2 times harder or like more intimidating.
Okay. So when you say 2 times harder, you're saying on a scale of 0 to 10, you're giving it a 20?
Or I'm saying like, with a group, it's like 7 out of 10.
Okay.
If it's just a solo, it's like 14 out of 10.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay. That's what I would. Elias, what do you think?
Whenever I've done it with a group, like with a vocal group or a choir or like instrumentally with other people, it's way less stressful. But anytime I've sung it alone or had to perform it alone, I guess that could apply to anything in any music, but I don't know. It's more stressful.
Yes, yes. Aiden, any thoughts, Mr. Montgomery or Brennan?
Well, I've done it so many times because the first time that I played it was on a float on a parade just by myself on guitar. I just played it instrumentally over and over again. So if I need to do it, it doesn't faze me really ever because I've played it that many times.
You picked like what conceivably would have been the worst case scenario to do it your first time. So everything after that, there's some merit in that, I think, in general. Like if you go into a gig and you're like, well, if I can get through this one, the likelihood that I'm ever going to have to deal with anything more stressful, that's kind of smart. So, but are we in agreement though, just in general, that and Jaden, I realize you say you've never performed it, but you're a pretty astute musician. Is your perception that it's a pretty difficult piece? Because you said you were intimidated by it. Like you flat out said, I'm intimidated by this thing.
If I'm going to sing it, like there's such a huge range, and we've talked about that before, you know, like it's really hard. But what also scares me is that like if you try to do any interpretation on it, you'll get criticism for it because it's different.
Okay,
you know?
hold on to that thought. We're gonna get to that in a second. We're gonna get to that in a minute. I'm just thinking about the song itself. Part of my problem when people criticize and you know, sometimes I do think we can talk about examples here in a minute. I do think sometimes when you get to the national anthem, yeah, some people make some choices that are probably not the best. And I get that. But some of it to me is also like some of the complaining that you see like immediately that'll show up on like Facebook or Instagram or wherever. Some of that just in my gut, I'm like, you need to go sing this once. I don't even care if you sing it like and anybody hears you. You need to legitimately try to perform this thing. It's unbelievably difficult. It just is. It's deceptive, and I know maybe this for those of you that are musicians, you'll know this. But for example, everybody is always thinking about how that last phrase is going to go, right? Because that's the big, you know, payoff moment. But if you start the song in your comfortable voice, which is where most people intuitively would want to go, you get to the middle bit, and unless you have a 5-octave vocal range, you're out of luck. And I feel like part of the problem for me with all the criticism is I feel like half of it is from people who don't have any perspective on what it takes to perform. It's not a pop song. It's like it's almost a cruel cruel melody. It is such a wide range and it is so hard to control. So why the criticism? Like do you think people don't realize it, or is it just because it's fun to like knock somebody down who gets to be in front of that many people showing off?
Anytime there's any sort of public thing where somebody is in the public eye. There's so much, people love to criticize things on the internet. I think that's just like a phenomenon. People love criticizing things. So they'll just like take anything they can get. And I think because it's something that everybody is familiar with and like have heard before, it's not like a niche thing. It's easier for lots of people to jump on the bandwagon.
I wonder if it's like, is it possible that the national anthem has become the worst scenario cover song ever? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it really, maybe it's that simple that it's just the worst possible cover song you could pick? Because everybody thinks they know what it's supposed to sound like, but they don't necessarily have a clue what it takes to actually do it. You know, it's like going to a club and there's a band playing, and it really almost doesn't even matter if they're any good or not. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know that song. Well, that's not the way it goes. You know, so let's move on to a second. This is the sort of the second half of this conversation. And I'm just curious what you guys think about it. If we accept all of that as true, we've talked in class at a bunch of different times over, you know, some of you for years, we always kind of come back to this topic of, if you're going to do a cover by somebody else, at what point do you say, I want to do it differently? I want to do something with it. I want to have a new spin on it. To just repeat the original for the sake of repeating the original. And I'm not talking about the national anthem now. I'm saying just in general. You know, I think most of us, and maybe this is my influence being overly impactful on all of you, but it seems like most of you, even when you guys do covers, you don't really have an interest in making it exactly what like you want to do something different, right? So why are we not allowed to do that with the national anthem? Like, what? It's like, it seems to me like that's the thing that if there's a very narrow path that you're allowed on, and with maybe two exceptions that I can think of in like the entire history of national anthems, are you allowed to stray very far without people completely freaking out? What is it? And is it just the patriotic element of it that people say, if you go too far afield, you are being disrespectful? Or is there something else to that? I don't know. I'm wondering, what do you think?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Please.
So there was a basketball game that Fergie performed the national anthem of, and she did like a sort of jazzy take on it.
Mhm.
And it's very laughable. I laugh at it because it sounded funny, and people still like make fun of it sometimes to this day, but she was just trying to take a different take on it. And I think another reason is not because it's patriotic, but also because it's just such a well-known song in this country. Like everyone knows the song, so different takes of it are taken differently.
So it's not so much a matter, you're saying it's not so much a matter of disrespect, it's just that didn't work, so here come the critics. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you had more, I apologize. But I actually have a question about the first point you made. You said it was a performance at a basketball game that Fergie did. She tried to do a jazzy take on it, and it was just you described it as laughable. I don't know if this can be separated with the national anthem or not, but we've talked about this in other contexts in class. Was it laughable because, like, the difference between content and capture? We talk about this all the time. The content and the performance. Like, was it a bad idea, or did she just have a bad run?
I think if it was performed differently, it would have worked out way better. But the way that she sang it didn't really work out with it had a good intention, but it didn't really work out for her.
Okay, so I'm going to nail you. I want to nail this down a little more specifically. You described it as a jazzy kind of take on it. As a concept, is that a good idea? Is that okay? Or is that's just doomed to fail? I don't care who sings it. I don't care what they do to it. You go down that road with the national anthem, it's not going to work.
Well, you think of the classic example of Jimi Hendrix performing the national anthem on his guitar. Everyone at the time thought that was so controversial, but now we think back on it and it's just, he was playing it on a guitar. It wasn't really too disrespectful, but at the time it was. So different ideas with the national anthem are just perceived differently at different times, I think also.
That's fair. He did kind of, I was actually wanting to get to him because he's one of the two examples I can think of where you literally went, I know what that song is. I know exactly what I'm used to hearing it go. That is nothing like what I expected, but it still works. But I never thought of it from the perspective at the time. My perception is that, and I don't know, I need to study my history better. I thought that at the time, it was more just because it was associated with Woodstock was the controversy, not the fact that he had done anything especially musically wrong, right, or otherwise. And I mean, I don't know.
I thought the controversy was because he played it in his own style, you know, like his really, really
Yes.
gritty style that he plays in. And he was
True.
playing, it was like, I remember my parents, when I was learning it on the guitar, that's what I was watching the video of him playing it. And my parents were describing it as like during the time people were calling it like he tarnished the national anthem by playing it that way, is what people were saying at the time.
Interesting. Because the other thing, and I don't know how familiar the rest of you are with the video, and if you're not, it's definitely worth it. You can find it on YouTube. It's all over the place. It's really heartfelt. Like when you watch him play it, it's extremely heartfelt. It's a bit of a bizarre circumstance. I don't know if you know much about the history of it. Hendrix was booked to be basically the closer of what he was like, that was going to be the end all be all moment, right? But by the time they got to his set, it had already been like 3 days and people were they were tired. So like they left. Now, there was still like somewhere between, I think, 30 and 50,000 people there, which lets you know how big the audiences had been, that 30 to 50,000 people is considered small. Like, I mean, it's just, Woodstock was crazy. The fact that it went off so well, you could never pull an event off like that today and have it not be just a glorified mess. Separate conversation. But or separate podcast topic, but it's pretty heartfelt. I'm wondering though, like that was a game changer, right? Are you guys familiar reasonably with the Hendrix version, or I mean, you know, kind of what it is? It's a game changer, right? Are there any other game changer national anthems you can think of? Because I can only think of one other where people were like, what was that? Where it's not just a variation. Like every time somebody does it now on their guitar, it's cool. But you cannot escape the, oh yeah, you're doing a variation on what Hendrix did. You know.
I think the Whitney Houston one was really cool. I'm kind of obsessed with that one, to be honest. It's like, so first of all, Whitney Houston was just an amazing singer. You know, she was able to just nail those notes so effortlessly. But the instrumentation and the orchestration behind it is what like makes me crazy, because he uses really simple chords just in different ways. He doesn't resolve on the one, he resolves on the four. And he uses a lot of really jazzy chords in the orchestra, which I just think is a really cool take on the thing, you know? But it's familiar enough not to be too interpretive and deviate from like the tradition, but it was interpreted enough to be more impactful than I feel like the original composition.
And you know, you're not wrong. I mean, basically, whenever somebody does a poll and says what's like, you know, the greatest national anthem renditions of all time, Whitney Houston, was it a Super Bowl, wasn't it, that she did it? I think. Can't remember which one. But that one always winds up way up high on the list. That's always like, whoa, wow, that's incredible. But are there any others? Anybody? I have one that I'm obsessed with, I will admit. I've played it for some of you before. It's the one that Marvin Gaye did. It's the I think it's 82 or 83 basketball all-star game. And it is, I don't know how he pulled it off. And I think the reason I'm obsessed with it is, and I agree with you, the Whitney Houston version is amazing. And the Hendrix version is just the idea of he kind of he opened the floodgates like he did on so much stuff. He just kind of proved that, you know what, you can go in a different direction. The Marvin Gaye one, I don't know how he pulled this off, because we just talked about how the melody and the song itself is so difficult. he made the national anthem like this cool jam. It's like an R&B tune all of a sudden. And he did it without it sounding, it's not disrespectful. It doesn't come across as like silly or goofy, but it starts with a drum machine. Now, granted, it's 1982, 1983, so everything started with the drum machine back then. But I mean, just, it is so anti-traditional from moment one. And then he starts to sing it, and he's doing it basically in 4 instead of 3. So it has, the feel is completely different than what we're used to anyway. But then it's Marvin Gaye, so it's got this kind of, just, there's a lushness about, there's, I mean, it's got his whole thing. It's crazy. The other part about it that doesn't, and this is the thing about, like, even in the Whitney Houston version, and my goodness, she was one of the greatest singers ever. That's kind of, you know, I don't think you can sustain an argument that she wasn't. But there's still some strain in the performance. You can tell where she's got to reach for certain notes by the nature of the way it's arranged, right? I mean, there's just this sense of push. I swear to you, if you watch the Marvin Gaye version from beginning to end, it's like he's just the king of cool. It like doesn't look like he's having to strain at all. It is the craziest thing. But it's totally, I've never seen anything like that before. It blows me away every time. I don't even know the countless number of times I've watched it. He could have released that as a single and it would have hit the pop charts. I am not kidding you. It's so bizarre. Are there others? I mean, is that, like, is there a line? Obviously, I think you could argue Hendrix initially went past a certain line, but I think that's because nobody was letting you go anywhere. At least in pop culture, nobody was doing anything with the national anthem at that point. So I don't know if it's really fair. But Whitney Houston isn't really any different. I mean, it's different and it's brilliant. I just mean, like, it's not, I don't know. It's like, what's the parameter?
I feel like, I don't know what, like, if this answers the parameter question necessarily, but like when I do a cover, like I like to change it, like, and make it more style, like my own. Like I'll change the rhythm or the instrumentation or something, because, and a lot of people do that with covers, because that's kind of the point of a cover most of the time, is not to sound exactly like what you're covering, unless it's like a cover band, but that's different. With the national anthem, I think because it does have such this wide range and it's so well known and it's so difficult to nail in the first place, it's much harder to make it your own. And there are only so many ways to do it, which is, and make it and pull it off, which is why I think there are only like 2 or 3 that have ever been like original and have worked and haven't been disastrous.
Interesting. Mr. Montgomery, you've been kind of quiet, but I actually have a question specific to you. Some people will not know what I'm about to say. Some people will. You are the current or past, or at some point you have been the president of the ASU Gospel Choir, right? Very cool. I mean, I think that's so awesome. I'm just curious, does the Gospel Choir do a version of the national anthem? Have they ever done a version of the national anthem? Mm-hmm. Okay. Were there, and again, I'm just curious, and maybe the answer is I have no, maybe you don't know because, like you said, COVID screwed everything up. Were there discussions that dealt with, like, were you at the point where you were talking about like interpretation at all, or was it strictly just, hey, it might be kind of cool to see what happens when we put these two groups together? Oh, okay. Okay. Did you just give away like an ASU state secret? Is that what just happened? Like the music schools? I'm gonna get like the Herberger dudes are gonna come in and like yell at me now. Okay, that's fair. Well, yeah, they're gonna yell at me. What do you care? No, but so you guys hadn't gotten into like necessarily like how you were gonna. It was just the idea of putting them together. Can I ask? And again, not for a test. I'm just curious. In your mind, obviously, you must. If you're the president of the organization, you must have some sense of what the gospel choir is capable of, what its tendencies are, maybe. In your mind, when when you think about the ASU Gospel Choir doing a version of the national anthem, whether it's with the marching band or on its own or whatever, do you hear like in your own mind, do you hear it kind of like it's probably going to have this kind of vibe or this element or the, like so what do you think again, just for the sake of curiosity, what do you think would have happened with a gospel choir version of the national anthem? What, what's the again? I'm not sure I really have a point. I'm just curious. When you say it would have been a challenge, what about it would beyond the fact that it's a hard piece to sing, just in general? Like what do you think the challenges would have been for that group specifically? Okay, okay, gotcha. Okay, interesting, interesting. Interesting. Mr. Brennan, you've played the national anthem.
I have.
What's your take on all this?
Well, I think that it is a challenging piece. I think we've established that. I think that in the public's eye, a good performance of the national anthem that like is memorable is either a traditional performance that is just the top echelon of performances,
Mhm.
or it's on the groundbreaking side where it is not so far out there that it loses like the attention of the people, but it's also not close enough to where it actually feels like something creative.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a final question. We'll just go around the horn here to wrap this up. And I don't know if this applies or not, but as you guys are all talking, one of the things that occurred to me is it possible? Like I believe there are certain pieces of music that, at least on the surface, there's only so much you can do to them before you travel into just areas of just not either musical interest or they just don't feel viable for one reason or another. There's a couple of songs like for example, our school fight song. And some of you have been around over the years, and I mean, I haven't given it this year because of COVID. It just didn't feel there wasn't a way to really execute it. Some of you are smiling because you've tried this before. Make it sound more modern, and no one's been able to pull it off. It's not for lack of trying. I've had people try to do it like with like do like beat making stuff and like that kind of sound to it. And I've had people try and do it in a way that's like almost singer songwritery or just anything to change it up, metal, whatever. And invariably, it just sounds like silly clown music. Like I don't know how else to describe it, but it sound or like a really really bad video game soundtrack. Like and our fight song's not bad at all. It's a great fight song, but it just doesn't lend itself to changes of style very well. It just isn't built into it. Is it possible that the national anthem is the same thing? That there's just part of the problem with people getting so upset about it is because it just doesn't lend it, with the couple of exceptions we've talked about, it just doesn't lend itself to reinterpretation. Elias, what do you think?
Yeah, it's like I was saying before, like it's one of those songs where you can't really do a whole lot to it as a cover song, because it isn't built for that. It's just the way it's structured and the way it was written. It's not quite built for that. There are only so many ways to do it, and kind of been maxed out.
Okay, that's fair. Jay, what about you? What do you think?
I personally think that with a national anthem, you have to stick to some things in order to like keep it the national anthem. Like in just about every single rendition of the national anthem, there's always like some kind of struggle or like at least a powerful figure in a way. I haven't seen Marvin Gaye's performance though, so I have to look that up later. But I feel like in that he has you described him as like cool, and that's kind of like a confident sort of vibe, and I feel like that's what pulls the I'm sorry, I can't speak
Yeah,
today.
right.
Yeah, the national anthem together, and that's kind of what like it has to be collected in a way. I don't know how to describe it further.
No. I think I'm following what you're saying, though. I genuinely, I think that makes sense. Jaden, what's your thought?
I think the main issue with these songs is just tradition, you know? Because if you do it the same, it becomes the same. You know, there's no variation and it becomes kind of bland, right? But if you add variation, then it's like disrespectful. So there's no winning on it, you know? Because knowing that the Arcadia Fight song also has the same issue goes to show the same kind of like respect issues, you know? Because if it has that quality to sound just wrong if you change it. It's so hard to describe. I don't know. But I just think it's the tradition that's getting in the way rather than the musicality of it.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Mr. Montgomery? Interesting. Mr. Brennan, you're up. What do you think?
I think the musical DNA of the chart also sort of makes it hard to be interpreted differently because the phrasing and the harmony and the way that the melody works with it, they all are sort of they are very like parasitical in a way where like they have to work off of each other. Like
Oh.
the melody can't really like maybe you could change the harmony a bit with substitutions, but those are still sort of having the same function in a way. So
Gotcha.
there are some things that like in order to interpret it differently, you would have to take away some of those structural parts of the song that I think would make it almost unrecognizable, so that it almost doesn't feel like an interpretation anymore.
And that's an interesting point, that it's just because of the nature of the building blocks almost of it, music. Mr. Dimmel, you get the last word, sir.
Well, I remember when I was in the house band and I learned the fight song, and we played it with like power chords, and I don't think we even played the entire song whenever we played it at basketball games or anything like that. We just played the beginning. It sounded fine with power chords. It wasn't anything too special, but I feel like if we would have pushed it more, it would have strayed away from being the fight song as it is. It would probably start to sound like something completely different.
Sure. Interesting. I don't know. I guess I find the whole thing so fascinating. It's like an invitation for people to come from all directions if you decide you're going to perform this thing. And sometimes I think, that's why a lot of people are like, yeah, thanks, no. It's a great honor. I don't even want to, get to that. Things we're just thinking about. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I truly meant what I said earlier. I really enjoy these conversations. I like that we do this. I like musically geeking out with all of you. It's a great way to end a school week. It truly, truly is. We will be back next week with another podcast on Friday, and we will have a live show on Thursday. All of it's at 2:30. It's always on YouTube, arcadiacms.com or arcadiacms.com/YouTube. They're free. Check out the website, arcadiacms.com. Check out the recording archives, and check out some really awesome music by these wonderful folks. All right. We will catch you all next time. Take care.